going to pass it on to Nicole Russell.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Nicole Russell, and I am one of the judges and the introducers to this debate. Like Howard said, the progressive era started in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. The progressive era is when many groups of people and historical figures are favoring or implementing social reformers or new liberal ideas. The progressive era is to improve tenements, women's suffrage, child labor, working conditions, and factories. By the way, the person who goes first will be based off a coin toss. And now, let the debate begin.
Parents, teachers, students, fellow members of the auditorium, I want you to imagine you're a poor immigrant and you're struggling to provide for your family and you don't have a voice. But the government made laws that treat you as equal as the middle class. Would you believe the progressive era was truly progressive? While historians argue between whether or not the progressive era was or was not truly progressive, because major acts happened after the fact. Well, my team and I believe the progressive era was truly progressive because it made others feel like they were being treated good, just like the middle class citizen instead of the second class. Because of all the major upgrades changed their life in a major way.
Was truly progressive, and if so, think about it. Well, in my opinion, it was definitely not progressive, especially when presidents started World War I for power and money. How was that even progressive? Weren't they supposed to change child labor, discrimination, living conditions, and even women's rights? Think about that. Was that even progressive?
Unfortunately, none of these changes happened. And if it did, it was very few. That's why my group is here to persuade you now.
And only until then Congress took charge. In 1911, a horrific fire broke out in New York City and claimed the lives of 146 women and men. It was then that Congress realized how bad factories were. In the history textbook, History of Lives, it says, New York responded to the 1911 Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire by setting the 56 worker protection laws. And based on the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory by setting up a state committee to investigate conditions in factories. And based on the committee's work, the legislature passed 56 worker protection laws. This proves that the progressive era was truly progressive because the state took an attempt to prevent dangerous accidents that might follow up with the factory fire in the future. And if it wasn't for these worker protection laws, factories won't be as safe as they are today.
Up next, we have Wasn't Truly Progressive. Topic is women. We have Mr. Joseph Howe on the mic. Team for Was Truly Progressive, please listen for your rebuttal on women.
What was women thought of? Women who thought as people that was unable to have rights and laws. Men had these thoughts and beliefs that women were unable to have jobs and should stay at home and take care of the children in the household. This made women furious and had to take a stand. They wanted to make an equal rights movement, but people did not agree with it. That's why it was not allowed in all states. The states that it was not allowed in was Washington, California, Oklahoma, and Arizona. And when the women did get the right to vote, it was only because they helped during World War I as nurses. This gave people the thought that they should have their rights. And another reason why that this wasn't progressive is because the ERA. The ERA said that if the women was to get approved, they would have to be equal as men in every single way, which means they have to join armies and get jobs just like them.
Up next, we have Antonio with the rebuttal on working conditions. Women.
As my opponent said, during World War I, women helped a lot, and they became nurses and also grew their gardens at home to provide for the men in arms. Also, in World War I, they had many factory jobs, which allowed them, like the government, to believe they could handle themselves. Furthermore, they were given and passed a law that allowed them to have like jobs that men could have. Also, during the Progressive Era, the 19th Amendment was passed, which was a big deal at the time. Because back then, women weren't even given any basic rights after they're married. So the 19th Amendment allowed them to vote, and that was a big deal because if you can't vote for your politicians, then I don't know where you're living right now. Also, it was truly progressive because women showed a lot of strength through marches. For example, the 20,000 march at Suffrage Line from the New York Times, it states 20,000 of them, according to police and suffrage estimates, marched in Fifth Avenue yesterday afternoon to protest their demands. This showed how much people really wanted to get women to have the right to vote. Imagine 20,000 people. Our brains can't even comprehend that much numbers. And thank you for listening.
Up next, we have Was Truly Progressive for Women. Wasn't, please listen for your rebuttal.
The Progressive Era was truly progressive because women's suffrage or right to vote was definitely granted. All you have to do is look into the Constitution and see the 19th Amendment. It passed. Now women can vote. It's not based on gender. During the Progressive Era, and well before, women were fighting for their right to vote. They were constantly disenfranchised. These extraordinary women were called suffragists. Women protested, created unions and clubs, and spoke to make their demand clear. They wanted the vote and equal treatment. In response to women being disenfranchised, thousands of women gathered and marched several times a day, all day. Women even went to jail and starved themselves just to get their point across. According to the New York Times article, 20,000 March in Suffrage Line from 1917, thousands of women packed the sidewalks on both sides of the avenue, from Washington Square to 59th Street to cheer the marches. Suffragists are making the argument that a country fighting for democracy at home by giving the vote to women. This shows how women protested and eventually their demand was met. Now they could vote all they wanted on their politicians, on president, on anything. And according to the movie that we watched, a vote is a fire escape, which also improved working conditions. All of these things help them in life, and I think that's why the Progressive Era was truly progressive.
Thank you. Up next, we have Genesis, Harmony, and Joseph rebuttaling Women for Wasn't Truly Progressive.
I find it interesting that you didn't include the point that African American women couldn't march along with white women. Also, African American women was getting disenfranchised at this time, but we're not talking about discrimination right now. Also, the ERA still hasn't passed today, which Joseph forgot to include. So, just because we have the right to vote, don't mean we have all the same rights as men. And African American men could not vote to begin with. They were getting disenfranchised by reading tests and money and weird questions that they couldn't be asked. Also, lynching was one of the main things that the government were ignoring. So I don't understand how you can say this is progressive when this is continued going on to the 1950s and probably through the 1960s too. So segregation did not end during the Progressive Era. It continued, and that's why we have the Civil Rights Movement to end all of these things happening. So yeah.
Antonio, as you stated about lynching, many people fought, many African Americans fought against it. So, take a look at Ida B. Wells. She fought against lynching, and everybody else who fought against lynching. Weren't they almost victims of lynching? Because Ida B. Wells got death threats to her home, and she was forced to move.
And you talking about how it was not how it ended and how discrimination ended, but we actually had a president that actually showed a KKK movie inside the White House, and therefore that shows that he approved of this racial discrimination against blacks.
Up next, we have Caviel Lopez stating his reasons for why it wasn't truly progressive on race. He is 6 feet tall today.
Discrimination. He was bound on it, and red-hot irons began at his feet and slowly branded his body. While the mob howled with delight at his shrieks, red-hot irons were run down his throat and cooked his tongue. His eyes were burned out. Do you guys actually think killing people and laughing at his shrieks was progressive? What if you were in his position and your body was getting burned into shreds? How would you feel? And the same thing was happening during the civil rights movement in the South. As President Wilson stated at the Peace Treaty of Versailles, we, the U.S., are the saviors of the world. We bring peace. If America is the savior of the world,
You might say black people are still discriminated against. You might say child labor still goes on. You might even say some don't live in the best of conditions. But living conditions were enhanced. Women's suffrage demands were met, and lots of changes happened in the end. So this was an improvement. The progressive era was progressive. We all know this because none of us live in a tenement. None of us work in terrible conditions. Well, it can be terrible sometimes.
Your judges are Jada.
If it wasn't progressive, then how are we here today? Like what Harmony said, the definition of progressive is improvement over a long period of time. Yes, you didn't say it, but you said it took a long time. Progressive means it takes a long period of time. Now, things didn't get better in a couple of years. It took time, like everything does. Now look around you today and compare it to what you hear and see back then in the progressive era. And ask yourself, was the progressive era truly progressive?
Era was a pathetic attempt to change things which later led to the civil rights movement. If we ended this at the time when we could have, many lives would have been saved. So, I do not think this is progressive. And you're right, look at where we are today. I see a lot of repeated things happening. Do you?
The progressive era is a wide range of economic, political, and social forms of outlaws between working, living, women, and race. People fought and wanted to give public a voice and fighting against the government, but the government won.